You're listening to the International Moving Podcast, your guide to moving to another country, brought to you by SDC International Shipping, LA's finest. An international move is exciting. It's a time to start over, establish a new business maybe, reestablish family ties, or retire where your budget will do more for you. Please enjoy today's episode, and if you have any questions about your international move, give us a call at 888-779-3962. That's 888-779-3962. All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Jim. As always, thanks for joining me for today's podcast episode. You know, it's July of 2025, and this month, like all the months before it, has just flown by. The time just keeps on going by faster and faster than ever before. But currently, the expat world is buzzing with movement, a lot of things happening. This year, more Americans, I think, than ever are packing up and relocating overseas. Not just Americans, too, but people in other countries, driven by things like flexible remote work policies, rising housing costs. I know it's true here for a lot of the major U.S. cities. Also, there's the lifestyle-driven migration trends that we see, and there are just a surge in relocations. We can look at places like California, Australia, people going from Texas to the UK, New York to countries like Germany and the Netherlands, and likewise there's people in the UK and Germany and the Netherlands. They're moving about. Some are leaving the U.S., people here in the U.S., to relocate to those countries, and some are going from those countries here to the U.S., all in search of something newer and better than what they had before. And in fact, according to recent reports, countries like Portugal, Spain, and Canada continue to be top destinations for expats in 2025, thanks to the digital nomad visas and the English-speaking communities. One of the other drivers is the more affordable healthcare system. So, yeah, things have changed. Some people would say not for the better, but yet the technology and some of the changes in the law makes it possible for more people to be mobile than in the past. So it's also worth noting that several countries have updated their immigration and customs policies in just the past few months. I joined a Reddit group, which is an expat group. I'm not sure what the name of it is. I don't really spend a lot of time on Reddit, but I wanted to check it out and see what was going on in the expat communities throughout the world. Very interesting conversations, people going from one country to another. A lot of the people in this particular group aren't from the U.S., they're from countries like Germany and Spain, and they're moving throughout Europe to different countries. One couple was talking about possibly moving from the United States to France, where the husband has extended family and parents. However, his wife doesn't speak French, and so they were debating whether that was going to be a problem or not as far as getting back into the workforce for her in France. And so they were making those debates. And then there's people beneath these different conversations adding in their opinions, their insights, and their own personal experiences. And that's one of the great things about the online world today. You can actually talk with people and read some of the stories about people going to the same places that, or who have gone to the same places that you're thinking about going to. One of the other things that I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but Portugal, I read, was changing their policy that you would have to be in the country for 10 years instead of 5 in order to apply for citizenship. That was pretty interesting. Germany has relaxed its language requirements for skilled professionals. Australia is now enforcing tighter inspections on shipments containing electronics and home appliances. This is going to make proper planning and working with experts like SDC, for example, even more important than in the past. And so, you know, if you're planning to move overseas, maybe you're going from California, you're leaving from Texas, New York, anywhere in the United States. Today I wanted to share with you some thoughts on the expat checklist. I'm going to walk you through what you need to do. We'll look at it step by step, hopefully avoid some common mistakes in your planning, and to help ensure more of a seamless transition to wherever it is that you're heading to, your new home abroad. So if you have a notebook, maybe you want to grab it and jot down a few notes, or maybe you just want to sit back and listen. The nice thing about this, audio recordings, you can listen to them over and over and over again. Even when you're mobile, you don't have to worry about bandwidth problems or anything like that with like you might have with video. So let's talk a little bit about this topic. I'm going to call this the expat checklist, I guess that would fit. And we'll get into this topic. So two things you want to do right off the bat. Make sure you have our contact information. On our website, sdcinternationalshipping.com, there is just ongoing, we just have so much information there on all these different topics, and so you can refer back to that at any time. Just save us in your browser, www.sdcinternationalshipping.com. If you want to talk to someone live, you can call us at 877-339-0267. That's our main website. We have other websites too. I'll talk about that maybe later on. But we have a team that's here to guide you each and every step of the way. So let's talk about the planning. So it's good that you understand how the plan works, and that way you can work with the experts that you're partnering with for your move, and it just helps everything go much smoother than winging it. So 90 to 120 days out. We might call this the research and planning stage. You want to begin researching your destination's entry requirements. You want to understand exactly what those are. And again, you can find that information at our website. You can find it in an expat group. You can find it using AI. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But you want to understand exactly what is going to be required of you. Next, you really want to understand the cost of living. I talked to a few expats in the past that basically told me that they didn't really research the cost of living that much. Long story short, different situations. One was an individual, the other was a married couple, but they wound up paying the same amount where they were as where they came from. And it wasn't so much that they regretted it, but it's just one of those situations where a lot of times, and I think I've mentioned this before in past episodes, when your dollar goes further, then you can upgrade your lifestyle, and then we're talking about in another country. And so a lot of times people don't really wind up with extra money at the end of the month. They are used to spending a certain amount, and they learn that, well, we can live even better by spending that same amount that we're spending now, but doing it in another country. We get more for it. We get more house. We get more land. We're able to go out to eat more. We're able to afford nicer transportation and so on. So it really depends on the individual whether or not they're going to save money. But you want to understand the cost of living. You want to understand the healthcare system. Now, the healthcare system is going to be extra important to you if you have health problems or health issues. You want to know how the hospital system works. You want to understand how, in a lot of countries where you can, let me just back up for a second with healthcare. Mention this. You can get an international health insurance, and you can pay for that. And there's a lot of companies that you can talk to and get different quotes for health insurance for Europe. Let's say you're going over to Europe, and that insurance policy will cover you, and you can pay maybe a little bit extra, and then you're always going to have access to English-speaking doctors, whether you're talking about personal physicians or emergencies in hospitals and things like that. So there are some pros and cons that you need to be aware of when we're talking about the healthcare system. One of the downsides of it, if you've ever talked to people that live there, is that oftentimes for seemingly simple things, there's long waits. So it's not like you can just go somewhere and maybe talk to a doctor or see a doctor within the next hour or so. Maybe you're familiar with how emergency rooms work over here, or you need an operation and you're put in a queue. Well, again, it depends on what type of health care that you have. And so a lot of people buy international health insurance. So this this particular episode, we're not focusing on health insurance, but it's something that I've heard quite a bit about, the pros and the cons. So that's why we're talking about, if you're in the research and planning stages, then this is one of the things that you're going to want to look into, especially if you have issues. Healthcare systems in other countries, some people would say they're better, some people would say they're not. Again, it depends on the individual. It depends on what type of finances are available to you. But there's a lot of pros and cons to the quote-unquote free healthcare systems that are in some other countries. And they're also not available easily to everyone. If that was the case, for example, let's just talk about this a little more as long as I started on the topic. I've heard people say before, who were here from other countries, that they would go back to their home country if they ever needed to have an operation because it would be more affordable to them. And then I heard people in other countries, again, we're talking about Europe right now, who said that in order to get the operation they needed, when they needed it, they had to reach into their pocket and pay for it because the line of people waiting for that type of treatment was a year or longer to get that type of treatment. So somebody might look at the healthcare system depending on where you're at. If you're in good health, then that's the best scenario. But if you're not, you really want to see what the pros and cons are and the different options that are available to you. Housing options is another thing. A lot of times the homes in other countries have a much smaller footprint than here in the U.S. Local laws are another thing you need to be aware of. Again, we're talking about 90 to 120 days out when you're researching and planning. You want to explore neighborhoods. You want to look into the school systems. Do they have international schools and international types of education? Is homeschooling available? The job markets, of course, to set realistic expectations. So here's an example. A California family moving to Australia researched Sydney's suburbs to find the family-friendly areas that made their transition from the U.S. to Australia much easier than, let's say, if they were going to the city. Another thing, you want to choose your international mover early. SDC International Shipping, for example, offers free consultations. They'll assess the move, explain the difference between full container load, also referred to as FCL, full container load, or less than container load, and the options, the differences between both. And that has to do with the amount of items that you're moving, your household goods. Maybe you're moving a vehicle plus your household goods, and you buy a container for your goods alone, or maybe you don't have enough, and it's worth looking into groupage shipping, where your items share a container with other people that are going to the same location. And then you can talk to the representative about the pros and cons of that approach. Online customs responsibilities for restricted, did I say online? I meant to say outline. There's different issues with customs for restricted items, again, depending on where you're going. Things like electronics or alcohol. For example, just off the top of my head, I read a story about somebody who was going from Florida to Spain, and they had to look into exactly what they were able to move and what they weren't, based on what was allowed into the country. Certain things that they thought would go through customs, as it turns out, wouldn't go through customs. Now, one of the nice things about choosing the international mover early, hopefully you'll choose SDC International Shipping, but you'll talk with a relocation expert that understands that country inside out. They're an expert in customs. They understand what's available to be moved and what can't be moved. And they also understand, they keep on top of the changes. For example, the laws change sometimes from one year to the next. Some things are on the restricted list for forever. If you look back and you'll see certain things. Other things that weren't maybe on the restriction list last year are this year. And so that's why it's good to talk to somebody that actually knows in current time, in real time, what's available and what isn't. So if you look at the timeline, the research that goes into looking at your destination, choosing the mover, and the mover being able to help you hopefully you choose a full service moving company like SDC and not a middleman. Well, how do you know? Well, one of the things you can do is you can research the company, the Better Business Bureau. I like using the Better Business Bureau a little bit better for something like this. And because it's easy to, especially online, to project a company in a way that's not real. For example, you could be talking to somebody who's living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment somewhere. They have a nice-looking website. They have a toll-free number, and all they're going to do is they're going to be a middleman, and they're going to contract for the lowest price, somebody to pick up your stuff, somebody to bring it to the port, and so on. That's not what you want. You want a company, one company, where you have a person that you're going to talk to throughout the whole process, and they're going to get eyes on exactly what it is that you're moving in order to give you a complete estimate. And no hidden fees, no surprises at the end. They're able to answer all of your questions. They don't have to get back to you at, another 2 or 3 days down the line. That's one of the things that happens if you're not dealing with a legitimate company, because that person is basically juggling the communications between themselves and their end client and all the people that they're subcontracting. So 90 to 120 days out, research your destination, choose the mover. Then when we're looking from 60 to 90 days out, then you're applying for your visa. You're organizing all of your documents. A lot of people have like a little safe deposit box or something in their home where they keep all their important documents, maybe social security information, insurance information, proof of your car ownership or title, all of those important documents, including your visa, of course. All of that needs to be organized and available to you. And that's between, I would say, 60 to 90 days out. And then when we're looking, let's say, a month before your actual move, that's when the decluttering process goes into full effect. And, after you've chosen your mover, of course, the person will answer any questions that you have. Maybe you need custom packing, or you're questioning, well, how does the mover get from where you're at all the way over here up? Maybe if you're in an apartment on the 3rd floor, how do they get everything up and down, or how does everything work? They'll answer those questions for you. But after you have that conversation, and I think most people do this in the back of their mind anyway, people think about decluttering. You're going to a new home, you're getting a fresh beginning. Do you still want to have all the exact same old junk that maybe you've been, maybe you've had it in a closet, you haven't looked at it in several years, or stuff in the garage? So you want to get rid of that stuff, give it away, sell some of it, have a garage sale, and then start your actual inventory list, because you're going to need documentation for everything that you take with you. You're going to need documentation for insurance purposes. And then, when we talk about when we're right on top of it, let's just say 30 days out or a little bit less, you're going to make sure that everything is confirmed with your utilities being turned off, final payments, all of that, closing out things here in, let's say, the U.S., if you're leaving from the U.S., confirming of all the logistics and everything that's coming up. And then, right before the actual moving day, when everybody comes out to pack everything up, you're looking at getting your essentials ready, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, finalizing the documents, and then comes the day of your actual move. So let's back up a little bit and look at the visas, the documents, the moving plans. You want to apply for the appropriate visa, of course. You want to ensure that your passport is valid for at least 6 months beyond your travel date. If you have pets, then you're going to need additional documentation. If you have children, you're going to need school records or health certificates. And for example, a Texas couple moving to the UK, they secured their Tier 2 visa early, and that way they avoided some delays. If you're not sure what that is, you can visit, we have a website specifically dedicated to people moving to the UK. That address is www.movefrom, movefromusa to uk.com. That's movefromusa to uk.com. You can find a lot of great information there if that's your destination country. You want to organize your personal records, like I said, birth certificates, school transcripts, vaccination records, insurance policies, marriage licenses. Make a list of all of those things. Digitize copies for easy access. You can put them on a thumb drive. And you want to have paper versions of them too. I'm not sure. I know there's certain places where they want the original versions or the one that's the certified copy. So that's something that you would have to ask your relocation specialist, depending on what country that you're going to. I know certain things certain situations where they want a certified copy and not just a copy of a certified copy, if that makes sense. So this is a great time when you're doing all that, is to getting ready to book your move and work with a company like SDC during this period, because they can also help you with planning to organize the records and the documentation and all of this, because you're going to be working with people that do this every day. And so, when this is the first time that you're doing it, or you haven't done this in years, again, you're not maybe really comfortable or confident that you have everything that you need, and you don't want to find yourself in a place at the last minute where they're asking for documentation that you don't have. So 30 to 60 days out, again, we talked a little bit about decluttering. Go room by room. I think that's going to be the easiest way to do it. Go room by room. Create 2 piles. One pile might be a donate pile. The other pile might be a sell pile, and get that taken care of. SDC offers professional packing of everything, custom crating for fragile items like artwork, antiques, electronics, all of that. And sea freight, which is usually the way most people move, because sea freight isn't good for an urgency, any type of urgency. It's not good for that. But urgent things can be moved via air freight. So some of your items that you might need immediately can go via air freight. Everything else, you can save some money by shipping it using sea freight. And then, of course, notifying the banks, your insurance providers, your credit card companies, all of those people about your move. Now, if you're married or have a significant other or other people around you to help you, then you can kind of, in the beginning, brainstorm this and think about everybody, putting 2 heads together sometimes is better than one, and think about all of the people that you need to update for this move. Things like prescription refills to cover maybe the first month that you're abroad, ensuring that you're not find yourself in a bad situation. And so you want to take care of all of this planning ahead of time before you get there. Now, the logistics, the most difficult part of the logistics, are going to be taken care of for you. That's one of the things that you're investing in when you go with a reputable international moving company. They take care of all of that. And sometimes, just like anything else, things can change. So there might be delays, or maybe the time has been shortened. Different things can happen depending on what times of the year that you leave, and also unforeseen events like weather events or something like that can delay an international move. And so SDC will work right alongside of you, confirming your move date, the pickup time, all of that. They will be with you every step of the journey. If you're shipping a vehicle with household goods, they'll walk you through all the requirements like the titles, the admissions compliance in your destination country, and all of that. You can check that out also if you go to our main website. On the front page, we have sections dedicated to things like vehicle shipping, artwork shipping, insurance, and all of that. So you can go there and get an overview of what's involved in the process. And then the final 2 weeks, you're packing your carry-on with essential documents, any medications that you might need. That's a big one there, where you really have to dot your I's and cross your T's, because you don't want to be bringing something that's considered illegal in another country. You don't want something confiscated, anything like that to happen. So again, you're going to be working with a relocation expert At least you will if you're working with SDC, and they'll help you with the information that you need. Things like chargers and valuables, the things that you can carry on your person. You want to have your suitcase prepared with the items that you're going to need for your first week abroad: clothing, toiletries, things like that. And then, spend some time with friends and family. Maybe go over and say goodbye to people, or have a get together with all of your friends and family. There's virtual farewells where people go on Zoom calls and they connect with everybody and let them know that they'll be moving there. That's another nice thing about the online world today, is that you can connect with people via Zoom, or Google has its version of it. I'm trying to think what it's called. Google has their version, Microsoft has its version, Microsoft Meet, and these are free services. Zoom also has a free service where you can communicate with people throughout the world. As long as you have decent internet access, you can do that. So you actually get to see people, which is nice than just talking on the phone. And then on your moving day, the SDC team, let's say, will arrive to complete the packing if you requested that, load your container, review the final inventory, and provide the shipping timeline to you. You'll receive the details, all the contact information for your destination agent, and then you can focus on the actual experience. You can focus on the travel, and you don't have to be uptight about, did things get on the boat okay? Did we miss anything? Were the forms filled out properly? All that is taken care of for you, and you're working with experts right from the beginning. So when you contact somebody from SDC International Shipping, for example, and you're getting ready to get an estimate for your move, they're going to actually get eyes on everything it is that you have. They come out and look room to room, or if you're in a location where you're at somewhat of a distance or it's too difficult to get there, then all we have to do is, there's plenty of apps that we can use, show you how to install those on your phone, and or if you have a tablet or something like that, and then we can get eyes on virtually what you have. And so, if you have a special antique curio cabinet, you can point that out, and it's important to let them know exactly what it is. Show them what it is that you're moving. If there's something that, if you have trouble with the video, take a picture of it on your phone or digital camera and send it to them. There's so many ways that you can get that information to people today, but the visuals are very important, because you don't want any surprises on packing day when somebody comes out. And I've heard of things like this happening before. A moving team comes out to someone's house and they didn't tell them about certain items that were in a certain room that required custom crating. And it's not that the custom crating can't be done, and it's not that it can't even be done at the last minute in an emergency. The problem is that is an additional charge that is going to be added on to the overall move. And so, it's important that you show people exactly what it is that you have, what you're moving, and that they know what's required, so they can give you an accurate number, an accurate estimate right up front, right? So just imagine this. Imagine if you were the moving company and you were going to someone's house and they just said, oh, there's, in the bedroom, there's just the normal thing. We have a bed and a dresser and stuff like that. And then you don't tell them that in the corner of the room you have an antique grandfather clock. And so that wasn't figured in the estimate. And that requires special crating in order to be moved properly. And so, of course, that's going to change the bottom line, because that requires for you to do things that you hadn't figured in the original estimate. So I'm just throwing that in there. And then after you arrive, then, of course, if you're in an expat community, it's even easier, because you have people to guide you through the process of opening up new accounts. And a lot of stuff, of course, you have to have settled before you go, including the place that you're going to be living in, your new home, whether it's a house or an apartment, whether you're renting or buying. Most people will will rent before they buy because they want to become familiar with the area, the pros and cons of it, maybe discover other areas that are closer that they like even better. But setting up a bank account usually is a great idea to do beforehand. That's something that you can do early. It's something you can do remotely to let those people know, let them know who you are, let them know when you're coming, and that way you don't have any problem in as far as writing a check or having a debit card ready in that country. If you have a personal accountant, that's another type of individual. People don't really talk about this too much, but if you're, let's say, a U.S. citizen, you still are going to, in most cases, not all, but most cases, you're still going to file a tax return at the end of the year, even though maybe you're living in that other country 12 months out of the year. And so a lot of people don't figure in for the taxes. Or they sell their home and they use that to buy another home in another country, and they don't realize that there's a tax to pay on the sale of that home because you didn't buy the next home, your primary residence, in the same country. So again, a lot of little different situations to think about, which is why it's great to start all of this early. So I had to tell you, if I was, and what I gave you today, these deadlines, I would say are the minimal. Personally, if I were moving to another country, I would probably start the research a good year ahead of time. And I'm just the kind of person where, I'm always worried, did I forget something? Is there some detail that I missed? And so working with an international moving company with a good reputation like SDC, that takes a whole big chunk of worry off the table. Because at least there you don't have to worry about the actual physical moving side of it. You can determine what your budget is. Maybe you decide that, maybe we should sell some things instead of moving, and maybe it's more cost effective to do it that way. But all that aside, all that is taken off the table, and somebody else is handling that. But then there's all of the other things like the tax advice and the banking side of it, and papers that prove that you've had these vaccinations, or the documentation showing your social security numbers and birth certificates and all of that. That would be the stuff that would probably keep me up at night. But it would keep me up even more if I had to do all of the other things that a company like SEC would be taking care of for me if I had to do all that by myself too. So work with people that understand the process, work with people that have been through it before. And when it comes to things like advice, accounting-wise, maybe you want to talk to either an attorney or a tax advisor that specializes in expat taxes. So if you're going to the UK, Spain, Portugal, wherever you're going, that individual knows the tax code there and knows what will be able to articulate to you what you're going to owe there versus what you're going to owe here and how those documents will be filed. All right, so that's maybe getting a little bit into the weeds, getting into the technical side of it, but it's really all part of it. And, sometimes it's easy to just say, you just pack up your stuff and you pay for that and you find a nice place to live. And today we got into a little bit more of the details of little things that might trip you up along the way, just to be aware of them. So, all right, I think that will do it for today's episode. This is Jim. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, as always, please go ahead, share it with a friend, share it online, send an email with a link, whatever works best for you. We appreciate it. The sharing of this podcast and these episodes really do help us reach people that we would otherwise probably not be able to reach, at least not quickly, because there's just so much noise in the online world today. We really do appreciate it for those of you who share these episodes. So thanks again. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in next week's episode.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for listening. Whether you're relocating within the country or moving to the other side of the world, we're here to help from start to finish. Connect with us today at 888-779-3962. That's 888-779-3962.